following is a Goulash Media production. goulashmedia.net.
See this here? This is my family. May not be like your family, but you come pointing guns in the direction of my wives and my kids, I will meet you at the door any time.
Get on the ground now!
Please stop! There are women and children in here!
All right, well, before we get into it, I want to tell you guys just a little behind the scenes. I was talking to a guy earlier this week, I think yesterday or the day before, that I'm planning on having on the show in 2 weeks. Trying to think of his name offhand. It was Gary Noesner, and he's coming on. But anyway, welcome back to the Waco recap episodes of Rotten Potatoes. We're here with Justin Kittens and Craig the Messiah to talk about the season finale and series finale of Waco. Justin, Craig, how are you guys doing?
I'll take the Messiah over Kittens any day of the week.
I'm great. I'm happy to be here.
We might just have to revive that nickname for me because I kind of miss it. I kind of miss that.
You miss the authority Messiah that comes with it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Well, yeah. So, yes, Gary is coming on the show. For those of you who are listening, here's a spoiler for you and a little sneak peek.
Is this for real life? Is this real life?
It is real life. Yes.
That's not true. You got to be lying too. You've got to be bullshitting.
I can send you the conversation if you want to.
No, that is incredible.
Yeah, I hit him up through his website, and he responded within a day and said, well, all of my interviews talking about Waco, I have to get approved by the Paramount Pictures guys or whatever, Paramount Network. And he was like, so you might want to contact this lady. And then he just tagged her into the conversation, and she responded like immediately and said, looks good. Everything checks out. You got the go-ahead from me. Just set it up with Gary. I'm like,
oh, that was fucking easy.
Yeah.
Nothing's ever that easy.
I know.
Nothing's that easy to reach, contacts, let alone, these higher up, more important people.
Yeah, I didn't see her message at first. I just saw his and read his, and I was like, this is never going to happen. There's no way the network is going to look at my podcast and be like, yeah, that's worth your time. And here we are.
I'm realizing and starting to worry about your value of your own life.
Yeah, a little masochistic, but it's all right. Anyway, so there's that. Let's talk about the episode. The episode was incredible, painful, and
it was hard to watch, but it did it right.
It was very hard to watch. Before we get into the details of it, Craig, I already talked to Justin about this right after I had seen it, and I knew you hadn't seen it yet, so I didn't want to spoil it for you. But did you catch the Easter eggs at the end there in the courtroom scene?
Did I catch the Easter eggs? I don't.
Where they're just in the courtroom, and Thibodeau is sitting on the bench.
I saw that.
There's a big guy sitting next to him, who is actually David Thibodeau.
I didn't see that.
I was looking in the background. Well, I was like, holy shit, that's David Thibodeau. That's amazing. And then I was like looking in the background because there's a bunch of people. And I was like, Gary's got to be in there somewhere, right? Gary has to be in this. And then you turn around and actor Gary goes up to shake the hand of the guy and get taken into the courtroom to give his testimony. And it's Gary Noesner that is the guy that shakes his hand.
I did not realize that. That's nuts.
I didn't realize it either until Dan pointed it out, but that was kind of incredible.
Yeah,
that's cool that they had those cameos in there.
Right. Yeah, it made me love the series even more because it's like whether everything's perfectly factual or not, at least you can see that they didn't just buy the rights to the book and then the people had nothing to do with it. Like they were supporting it, and they've done press and all that stuff supporting the show, which I think is awesome.
I think I remember reading an interview or something about the series as it was coming out that not only were Thibodeau and Noesner involved in the production of the series, but they actually met each other for the first time during the creation of the series. Mm-hmm. And they still had some disagreements, which we'll get into this episode, which is I think this episode might have compromised on a few things, but I'm still satisfied with how they compromised. But they seem to they seem to agree on the tragedy and the terrible things that happened overall. So that was interesting.
Let's get into it. Craig, give us your thoughts. Give us a breakdown here.
So this one opens up on day 40 is what the timeline showed at the bottom of the screen when the episode first started, and it opens up to continuing the psychological warfare. The kids are just huddling in rooms trying to sleep while they're blasting the lights and the noise and all the slaughtered animals sounds and stuff like that, about where we left off last week. Mm-hmm. So they continued on with that, and then all of a sudden we're into where the FBI is basically at the end of their ropes with waiting on this. Apparently, Gary Noesner hasn't made contact with the Davidians for I don't know how long, a couple weeks, couple days, who knows. It's been a while from the way it sounds that they haven't been able to make contact for a while. And so the tactical team is ramping up their final strike plans and stuff like that. And Gary's just kind of getting frantic, wanting to make communication with them, trying to slow down the process of the siege. And that's kind of where we start off. That's the position we're in. And right in the beginning, and one of my favorite parts of the whole series was the radio broadcaster. I know we talked about him. I just love the people he interviews on there. I love his take on it, the whole thing, and the sides he takes. He's never on either side. But he just points blatantly out the obvious that this is pretty much the government is way overstepping their bounds here, and he's against it. And we see he is talking to, I don't know if it's like a theology professor or something like that at the beginning, and they're talking about how the Davidians, they've kind of heard their story and what they believe and stuff, and this guy basically says, or flat out says, the Davidians are not crazy people. They just have these beliefs, and these beliefs are logical and they make sense, and they're very logically ordered and stuff. So he's not a crazy person. Are you sitting? Are you actually sitting for this?
I've had a long day of sitting. I'm going to continue it. Yeah. Some of the things that stuck out to me that really struck a chord were like when they're talking about the CS gas with whoever it was.
Right. That part blew my mind because I didn't know that part. When Gary was talking,
was illegal, and that it would be
against. It would be considered a war crime if it was used on terrorists. It's against the Geneva Convention. It would be considered. This was Gary talking to the head FBI guy, the big plump man, and they're going over this plan, and they get this. Towards the beginning, you see that the main FBI guy and the head of the tactical team, they are gone. They leave and go talk to what's her name now?
We're getting ahead of ourselves. Let's talk about before what leads up to this, because I do want to point out something specific in the Janet Reno scene that's really important. Sure. But we were talking about how the Davidians did not have any contact with the negotiators, and eventually contact gets put back together when they realize that the Davidians are interacting with the radio host, which is where I thought you were going to bring that up. That was really
that's where I was going. I lost track.
So much stuff in this one. It's
there's a lot to say. But basically what happens is that Koresh claims he gets a sign from God, and he's able to explain what the 7 seals meant. And so he gets on the call with the negotiator, and he says, once I get this all written up, we're coming out. I'll go to jail. I'll do my time, but I got it. You got to let me finish this before it comes out. And Noesner was excited. He was like, all right, we got something. This is good. But then it looks like it's ended up taking more than a week to put together, and that's when the FBI is like, you know what? We're done with you. We're done with this. We're doing it our way now. We're going to do it, and that's when the CS gas shows up. That's when they get the approval from Janet Reno. And during that scene with Janet Reno, if you'll remember, they're having this back and forth, and she's like, "But you're going to use CS gas? Isn't that harmful to the kids?"
Right.
And they're like, well, yeah, they don't have gas masks, but the parents will know they don't have gas masks, so the
Right.
parents will take them out.
Yeah,
And then
there's a specific quote that's like, once these people see their kids' eyes watering, it'll be game over, and they'll bring them out. It's like, that is so...
That's a big gamble you're taking.
Right. Even if, CS gas just made people's eyes water, that's a terrible thing. Like,
Right.
So
We're just going to torture the kids until the parents decide to come out, is
Right.
what they're saying.
well,
That's like saying we're only going to waterboard the kids until the parents decide to give up.
right.
exactly. And but what was great was they were hinting at something very important about Janet Reno. Is they know that she has and obviously any normal person would have a soft spot for kids. And you can remember the scene where the more like tough HRT guy says, yeah, we still have evidence that they're still abusing these kids. And you can see that the head guy looks back like, what the hell are you talking about? Like, we don't have
Right,
that evidence.
yeah.
But he doesn't say that, but he looks at him like, what are you saying? And then you
Yeah,
can see
it's pretty
Janet
clear.
Reno's like, oh, if there's abuse, then of course we got to go in and stop it. Like that was one of the big things is
If they're
that
abusing
people
those kids, we got to bomb those kids.
Yeah.
Well, the whole, like, what about the children type quote basically comes from Janet Reno. That was kind of her reasoning in interviews and stuff was we had severe fear for the children, so that's why we took these steps. That was her defense for making the decisions she did. And I've said from the beginning, I don't know where I stand on Janet Reno's part, but based on that show, the information they were giving her, she probably did make a halfway decent decision. If she is worried that they are still abusing the kids, it's like, yeah, we need to get them out of there.
Right.
And so, like you said, they were definitely appealing to her her consideration of children and like that soft spot in her. And
Right.
that's what kind of pushed her towards signing off on this.
Yeah, and when
So-
the guys get back, Gary's like talking to David and them, and he's like kind of freaking out, like, you guys need to do this. You don't know what's going to happen, but it's not going to be good, basically. And they walk in on him and cut the power and send him home, say that he's too close to the matter, which obviously, I mean, based on the show, obviously it was just because he was the only thing in the way of them getting to carry this out.
Right. So yeah, they send him packing. He goes home, and now they don't have that one strong negotiator that's keeping things alive, keeping the negotiators alive. The guy they kept on was his his partner, his understudy or whatever, his
Right.
secondhand guy. That guy was definitely for sure a yes man in the whole situation, and that's why they kept him on. He's going to do whatever he's going to tell the Davidians whatever they tell him to. So he basically broke everything that Gary had worked for 51 days. His brief conversations with the Davidians just pretty much ruined all that. It's like, no, we're done with you. You need to come out now. We're not
Right.
talking anymore.
Yeah, that guy was basically just yelling at him after that. So
he was not a
there
good
no chance.
negotiator.
Yeah,
He wasn't negotiating.
right.
Yeah. So, all right. I think we've reached day 51 when the tanks start to show up. And, there was one thing that this wasn't right how it played out, but I think they were trying to make a point. The day of the 51st, the tanks show up, they start, breaking into the building. They're injecting the gas. Steve Schneider gets on the phone and is like, like, what the hell are you doing? What's going on?
Mhm.
Why are you attacking? And then they're saying, this is not an attack. Like, this is not, we're not coming in there. And Schneider breaks the phone and, destroys it.
Yeah.
It's sort of like, it didn't exactly go down that way with regards to the phone being broken. But that, because they did lose contact. Like, the phone got broken, but it didn't go down exactly that way.
Yeah, that's probably just them dramatizing the loss of communication with them.
Right. Do we
and
know how
that's
the
when
phone
they-
got broken?
I want to say that it was like they got they thought the phone line got cut by the FBI when they were talking, because it did get cut off that one scene when the
Right.
Noesner was talking, and the Davidians put like a sign out saying, we want our phone reestablished, phone
Okay,
line reestablished,
so-
and then
Yeah, based on that, obviously it was well before all the shit was going down, because they had time to make up a new banner and hang it out the window. You guys are frozen. Are you still there?
You froze.
we're here.
We're here. You
Okay.
froze.
Sure. Yeah. Before, another thing that I really thought was powerful is when Gary was getting sent home. He made the statement like, "Before all this, do you know how they kept the Davidians in line? They talked to them. Like the sheriff didn't even carry a sidearm when he talked to them. Like they were fine. There was like just driving the point home, even up to the last second, that this is not okay, and it never was."
That was a very powerful scene there. His like final statement on the whole situation is like he basically said, "What you guys are doing is not gonna succeed. It's going to fail miserably."
Right.
That's not how they've dealt with them in the past. They just have communication with them and talk through things with them, and that just shows that they were, in general, just a peaceful people. If the sheriff could just go in there and just carry conversation with him. And we saw that in one of the first episodes. They brought in the sheriff because he was the one guy that they could communicate with, and he kind of talked through things with them a little bit. And that was right before Gary went home. That was the last things he got to say to them, at least in the show.
Yeah, and into the whole Day 51, I love that they showed, like, when the tanks are busting through. Everything, as awful as it is to see, it is so powerful and so important to see, because, like, just us talking about it before and, like, on the main episodes, it's like, it doesn't do it justice, like, if you can't
and knowing
see people.
Everything that happens, too. Like, I was literally on the edge of my seat. My muscles were, like, tensed up. It's like watching any action movie, like, oh, I hope they get out. I hope they get out. Even though I know they're not going to get out. I'm, like, so tense watching this whole thing. And it was one of the more emotional things I've ever watched, especially knowing.
I'm not an emotional guy. I teared up several times during this scene, and
I got pretty close. Yeah,
they even showed like the people getting things toppling over on them, like the blunt force trauma and all that they talked about. Not just like people burning alive, like people just from the tanks coming in. Even if they didn't like spray any gas, there were people that were being crushed by things and falling debris. And they showed it. They showed it all.
So one of the things I think it could have been. One of the couple compromises I think they made was they didn't show it, but they mentioned the Davidians thought they heard gunshots. And I think that was a reference to the fact that there seems to be strong evidence that Delta Squad was there that day and shooting not only outside of the compound, got me again, outside of Mount Carmel, but also around back near the kitchen area where some people were trying to escape.
The thing, I thought they played this episode very safe for the most part. They didn't show, like you said, anybody really shooting. But the one thing that pissed me off beyond belief was they were still listening to the radio, the Davidians were, and or listening to the TV or the news and stuff. And they're like, there's reports coming out that there's fire coming from, or shots being shot from the Davidians. The Davidians are shooting at the FBI. And
they did show the Davidians. They're like, who's shooting? Nobody's shooting. We're all huddled here.
Yeah, they're all in the chapel, and they're looking at each other like, one of them actually said, who's shooting?
Right. I do love the fact that they didn't. I mean, we were speculating the whole time, would they show who started the fire?
That was the next compromise they made, because one of the plausible explanations for the fire starting was when the tanks were injecting the gas, knocking over the gas lamps that were being used because the Davidians had lost access to power as a possibility.
I was fine with them not showing it exactly. Like, of course, there's huge speculation. Everybody has claims on both sides about how that happened. I was fine with them kind of leaving that up in the air, and they did show. They specifically showed one of the lamps getting knocked over, and what's his name?
Steve Schneider.
Yeah, he stomps it out, and he gets the fire put out. But they definitely alluded to the fact that that could be a cause. But something that I didn't realize, we've talked about how flammable the CS gas is, but I didn't realize like quite the extent of it that I've come to realize from watching this and from listening to Scott Horton's interview with David Thibodeau, which you guys should all go check that out too, because it's amazing. But no matter who started the fire, like they say in the radio broadcast, like they don't show it, They don't say they started the fire, but the radio guy specifically says, which I thought was fantastic. He says,
Yeah,
this has happened over and over and over again, and every single time there's a standoff, there's CS gas, and there's a fire, and people died. And they show like a bunch of different accounts saying, and not only that, but they knew that that was a high possibility, and they did not have any plan to put out a fire. There were no fire trucks there or any backup in case that were to happen. So even if they didn't deliberately go in and start a fire, they knew that that was a high possibility, and they had no plan for preventing that.
I thought that scene there dealt with it the best way possible, was that radio broadcast that they aired, because like you said, we got to towards the end of it where the thing's in flames. It's like, well, they kind of left that open, and which it is open. There is speculation on both sides. And the guy came out and said, well, Davidians are saying the FBI started, the FBI is saying the Davidians started it. And then he goes into that rant about this date, this FBI inserted gas, like you said, and fire happened and people died, and just over and over and over. And then he's just like, common sense says that's probably what caused the fire. And I thought that was a very, very powerful scene there. Just them pointing that part out. It's just like, you should have like cross-checked that before you used that, that method of getting them out.
You should have never used that method of getting them out.
Yeah.
Right. So if we can't use it on our enemies, what makes you think we should use it on our own civilians?
Yeah,
if we're not allowed to use it against our enemies.
The freaking radio broadcast made me like tear up just listening to him talking about it and talking about like, this is not okay that this happened. No matter who's responsible for the fire, this is a terrible thing. And these people were all Americans, and these people were not our enemies, and they just got slaughtered.
Yeah, and
watching the kids get trapped in the vault is what made me tear up.
Oh yeah,
because especially. Go on, sorry.
I was just saying, you hear them say, the heat sources, the infrared heat sources say people are huddling in the vault and we're not getting gas in there. So they intentionally bust through the vault with their tank, and in the process knock a bunch of crap in front of the vault door.
Yeah, they cover the exit so they can't even escape. Do we know if that happened for sure?
Yes. So well, you mean the exit being
blocked so that they couldn't escape?
Yeah, I think. I mean, you know what? I'm not entirely sure about that. I do know
like
that
it seems like Thibodeau talked about it. Yeah, it seems like Thibodeau talked about it in the Scott Horton interview too, and seemed to confirm it.
We talked about in the main episode that a lot of the exits were blocked except one exit, and in our episode we had pointed out that there was possible gunfire at that exit, and nobody could get out the other. Right. Any of the others were blocked off because the doors were knocked in and stuff like that.
I was going to say that the majority of the women and children were found in that steel or like the concrete area.
Right.
That's where a lot of the corpses were found, and especially knowing, just to say this because it's important to know and make sure everyone's aware, when the CS gas was inserted in there, I mean, they couldn't show it because I know they weren't going to show it actually what's going to happen to these kids when it's CS gas and it's burning CS gas and it releases that compound that's used in executions, which causes your muscles to spasm and your body just contorts, and it's just absolutely disgusting. And to know that that's how some of the kids died, or were they suffocated, and
right. It was emotional enough as they presented it, with these kids basically like, having trapped. Small spasms and like crying until they pass out, and then the moms being like freaking out about that, trying to wake their dead kids back up. Like that was extremely emotional. Not to mention the fact that these mothers probably witnessed their kids going into giant convulsions that broke their backs. Like, right. And we do see the one girl, I don't remember her name, she's trying to escape the back exit with the bus, which was a horrifying scene where the FBI guy or ATF guy, I don't remember, comes over and he's, you can see him kind of having a change of heart trying to get her out of there, and she's like dying and can't get out. She's like, we surrender. And it's like, holy freaking shit.
You can see their mindset change instantly when they're like, why aren't they coming out?
Right.
Why the hell aren't they coming out? What are they doing? Why aren't they coming out? And
Yeah,
it's
in their
just,
minds,
all of a sudden it switched to instant panic mode. Like, oh my God, what the hell are we doing? They're not coming out.
in their minds, this was we start this, it's a victory in 5 minutes. We all get to go home, back to our families and everything. They didn't even seem to think about the possibility that this isn't going to go how you plan. Like, these people are going to retreat to the lowest level instead of running out the door. They're going to try and be safe, which, I mean, according to the show, the main reason they went to the vault is because the gas wasn't getting into there, so they were huddled in there, and then that was broken into. So do we know anything about, do we have any evidence of the whole Steve Schneider shooting David Koresh in the head and then killing himself?
They say because they found bodies with gunshot wounds, and the FBI's whole claim that they never shot has always been their push. They never shot a single fire. Nobody got shot from the FBI. So that was kind of the official story, is that several of the Davidians either shot each other or shot themselves to, like, either get past it, like just end it quicker, or just a mass suicide type thing. So
right.
Kind of the official story is they shot themselves. So
yeah, and on that note, in the David Thibodeau interview with Scott Horton, I'm going to keep saying it so that everybody goes and listens to it. On the Scott Horton show with David Thibodeau that just came out, thank you for sending me that, Justin. He said something that I thought was very, very crazy and powerful. He was like, I didn't think there was any chance I was going to live through that day. I thought 100% as soon as I left the Mount Carmel, as soon as I went out the window or the door or whatever, they were going to shoot me on the spot. I had basically accepted that I was going to die and just thought that getting shot and mowed down by the FBI would be quicker and less painful than burning alive. So it's like, right. Nobody thought that, it seems as though the mindset was not, we're going to stay here for our religion and for our faith necessarily. Like, the people that were in there were horrified to leave because it was more of a hostage situation from the FBI than it was from David Koresh.
Right.
It's so I remember seeing somewhere that they were talking about some of the forensic evidence indicated, you could tell if it's a self-inflicted gunshot wound versus one that was at close quarter range. And so whether or not Schneider shot Koresh and then Schneider killed himself, I'm not entirely sure. But as we talked about in the main episode, the majority of these bodies were conveniently left in a truck that had its refrigeration turned off, so they decomposed. So there's no way we can actually go and look at them now. So,
right.
To say the least.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think if there's anything. I mean, overall, like, I'm really glad that it seemed like they really tried to tell the truth. They really tried to, that they took a lot of what Thibodeau did. They took a lot of what this negotiator did. And I do think that listening to the negotiator side of some things, some of the negotiators sounded kind of weird, like that whole back and forth, not in the miniseries, but in the documentary's Rules of Engagement, when they were discussing whether or not there were guns on the helicopter, that was a slight of some very careful with words. They were not being, but I really think they did a great job. And again, I feel like I have to say this.
Was that Gary on the phone with him? Or no, it was a woman, wasn't it, talking to him?
I don't think it was Gary. I think it was another guy, though. It was a different name.
Which part was this?
This was in Rules of Engagement when they were discussing of the first day, February 28th, and they were saying there's helicopters firing on us, and there's no guns on these helicopters, and then it really, they were talking about mounted guns versus people actually carrying guns and things like that.
Yeah, that was a guy. It wasn't Gary. I don't think at this point, but it was a guy. It was I think this might have been an ATF guy at this point.
It would have been ATF at this point because FBI didn't get involved till after the fact.
Sure.
Yeah, and they did allude to that too with the lawyers, because they brought the lawyers in, because they made communication, got lawyers in, and that scene where they're bringing the lawyers, where the lawyers show up, that made me kind of chuckle, because they're like, so you're denying them the right to have lawyers present, so that's what you're going to go with? You're going to have all these charges that you're going to bring up against them just completely drop because you denied them communication with lawyers, and they're like, well, shit, I guess we got to let him go in.
But yeah,
And then the lawyers go in, and the lawyer points out, he's like, the ATF and FBI are saying you guys shot first, but the bullet holes in the doors are bent inwards. And then they're saying that there was no helicopter shot, but the holes in the roof prove that there was helicopter shots. So we think there's a good case for self-defense here. Yeah. And so that scene there alone, I
summarizing all the evidence, I'm glad they did that.
Right.
I actually just remembered something which is important that they didn't touch on in this episode, but to clarify for the listeners. So the FBI believed that Koresh was stalling for time when he was talking about writing the 7 seals. And it just turned out that it was taking longer because of, whatever God took time to tell Koresh how to interpret the seals or whatever.
Right.
But one of the Davidians managed to take out with them the first seal being translated. You can find that online. So I don't think they really mentioned that in the episode, but there is proof that Koresh was doing what he said he was going to do, and that just took longer. And it really came down to the FBI was just getting very antsy, and they just wanted to end it and get it done as soon as possible to move forward.
Yeah.
And just imagine imagine if the whole thing just didn't happen, obviously, because there's still the whole talk about illegal guns that don't exist or that were made up, and whatever Koresh did that with regards to children. Yeah, if he did, let's get him, put him in jail.
Right.
Terrible guy.
Let's give the FBI and the ATF the full benefit of the doubt that they had these people's best interest in mind, and they were just there because they thought something was going on with the kids, regardless of whether the ATF should have been there to help kids. Putting all of the blatant evidence to the contrary aside, it's like, do you want them to get out of there? Really? If you do, it's not a hard path, especially when you're to the point where David Koresh is like, just let me finish writing this up and then we'll be gone. And he even said blatant, yes, I will come out. Absolutely. The lawyer going in and telling him that seemed to be, at least in the episode, seemed to be what kind of changed David's mind and made him yeah, we will come out. Because God's talking to me now. I'm inspired to finish this up and get my legacy heard and all that, or not.
His whole point was if he didn't release it before he came out, he wouldn't be heard at all. They'd just cover everything up and cover up all the evidence and stuff like that. And so he wanted to get this message out before he came out, so that way the message was out there. And then he was going to turn himself in because he knew once he went to jail, he probably wouldn't get hurt at all.
So this reminds me of something. And again, this was brought up, and just to clarify for everything. So Scott Horton, great guy, was the person who introduced me to everything about Waco. And he recently interviewed, as Dan has been saying a lot, recently the real David Thibodeau, the guy who wrote the book, the guy who was there, one of the survivors who got out the day of the fire.
Show.
Yes. So during that interview, there was one... there's a lot of stuff that he clarified, and oh my God, I just blanked on it. Oh, I forgot what I was going to say. I went through that whole thing and then the thought left my mind.
You think about it. I was going to say, even if we give them full benefit of the doubt that they were actually trying to get him out of there, and he took. Yes, there's the fact and the problem that he said that he was going to come out before, and he didn't, and then there was all the time in between, and then he said again, he said definitively, but he seemed, at least in the show, he seemed in a much more positive and happy, yes, because it's time, and I'm going to write this, and it's going to be good. Giving them the benefit of the doubt, wait another day or two. Yes, you've been there for a long time, and yes, it's hard, but do you really want them to come out, or do you just want to be done with this shit?
Right, and I had made the comment to my wife because I watched it with her. I was like, that 51 days just was a wash at that point, because all the negotiations, all that time, and all that effort they put into it,
right,
to just go, let's just go in and destroy everything now. It's just like,
and to tell Gary to F off with all the work that he's done.
Why did you even bother to wait if that's the case?
Yeah, and they also in the show made it very apparent that these walls were not it's not a bunker. It wasn't going to withstand a lot. The place is
just
collapsing
plywood.
in. Yeah, it's toppling just from them poking holes in the side of it. The fact that they can just poke holes in the side of it, which, yeah, I don't know. I loved
Shows that it wasn't a compound, as Justin keeps saying.
Right. Yeah, Justin, get your facts straight.
Obviously.
Don't be a bigot. But also, I love the fact that they showed Gary at home, like watching this all unfold, and showed him like weeping for these people and for all the effort that he put into saving these lives and doing his job, and then they just wiped him off the face of the earth.
Yeah, that had to have been, from his point of view and all the effort that he put into it, that had to have just been just crushed. And I can't imagine. I don't know if he returned to the FBI, but I know there's no way I would have been able to return to the FBI after that.
Yeah.
There's no way I could have gone back to life the way it was before. It's just like, it would be over for me. I'd probably end up in a hospital, a mental hospital somewhere. Yeah, exactly.
Like, just imagine the mental trauma of being like in this very tense, crazy situation that you've been in a bunch of times before, but like on such an escalated level where there's tons and tons of people whose lives are depending on you, on the side of the Davidians and your FBI people who have been shot. Like, you hold a lot of weight and you put all this time into it. You finally see this clear end to everything. Like, this is going to happen. They're going to come out. They said they were going to come out. I believe them. They're coming out. We can all be done with this. Everybody will be happy. And then you get fired or you get sent home and off the case because you cared too much. And then watch them all burn.
How dare you care for humanity?
Right.
Yeah.
Saying you're too close to it for a negotiator? Like, shouldn't they be? Shouldn't they be trying to relate to them? Shouldn't they be close to it?
No, it just shows why that guy wasn't a negotiator. There was one thing that I said incorrectly earlier that I remembered that I heard from Scott Horton's interview, David Thibodeau. I had said the scene with Thibodeau burying the body was Thibodeau, and it was someone else burying another person's body. But I think they made the point was there would be too many characters to follow, so they were getting the point across that there was a body purposely being buried outside along with the dogs that were shot, and the tanks just ran over them multiple times.
So you say Thibodeau did bury one of the bodies?
No, Thibodeau did not bury any bodies.
Okay, gotcha.
They portrayed his character of doing it, but the reason they did that was just not to have too many characters the audience would have to follow in a 6-episode series.
Which makes sense. It makes you care more about the fact that it's getting squashed too, because we don't relate to every single character like he did at the time. Like these were all humans to him, and we in a 6-episode miniseries can only relate to so many characters. So showing one person that you have the most sympathy for doing it made it more impactful. I see why they did that.
Yeah. So I guess like we're at the end right now. It's I say it every time, but I just wish this wasn't real because it was great. I mean, everything about it with the production quality, I was texting my girlfriend when I just started watching it, and I was already complaining because I was like, this is great, and I know what's going to happen, and it's terrible. Right. Like, I know what's going to happen.
This is a fun show, and it's not going to end well.
Yeah, and it's just absolutely dreadful that no one knows about it. Well, now some people do know about it. Now some people are going to come back and maybe give this another look and maybe look at some of the resources. And oh my God, I remembered finally what I was going to say, what I meant to say earlier. All right, so in the miniseries, they portrayed the first time that Koresh lied was that he said they would show his sermon to the world. And the way they showed it in the miniseries was they showed it and then everyone made fun of him. Then he got mad. Well, then the book that I read on it, done by Carol Moore, which was really well done, really well researched, in her book, she claimed that it was only broadcasted locally in Waco and Dallas. Now, Thibodeau claims he was there, so I think if I'm going to believe anyone, I'm going to believe the guy that was there, that it was only aired on a Christian network locally.
Oh, jeez.
Which seems
and the Christians probably thought, I mean, he's saying he's the Messiah, so they're not even going to listen to it anyway.
Right.
Exactly. So that was, I think, everyone go when you're finished listening to this episode, go listen to the David Thibodeau interview. It's important, and it's great that Scott got him on to do that.
Absolutely. And I reached out to David myself. and he has seen my messages on Facebook and has not responded. So, David, if you happen to be a member of the Downers Club, please come on the show. I would, honestly, I don't really know what their relationship is necessarily, but they've been on other things together. But I would love to get him and Gary on at the same time to discuss it and get both angles. Of course, that will be a very long episode probably if I do, but I would love to have them on. Even if it had to be 2 hours of them each individually, I would happily do it just because I think it's a very important case and one that I knew so little about before a couple months ago, and now I'm just like all about it. Like, it's so crazy. Like I said in the I think the intro of the second episode, it's like the only reason why people don't care more about this is it has to be because they don't see these as real people. Like, this is just a story that they heard. If they've heard it at all, which I hadn't even heard it at all, but if you hear it, it's like, these were crazy cult leaders and cult members and everything. And it's like, no, these were American peaceful citizens.
What makes it more real to me is the fact that it happened in our lifetime. It's not like one of those things that happened back in the 60s or back in during like World War II or something like that, like Nazi Germany or something like that. This happened within our generation. Like, I remember hearing
when we were talking about it, the thought never occurred to me that some people from this are still alive. Like, the thought of getting, like, I didn't even think of, I should get David Thibodeau or Gary
Noesner,
that guy on the show. Didn't think that they would even still be alive, because you just hear about these things vaguely and in passing, and you assume, oh, that's that thing from way back when that doesn't matter. It's like, it did happen. It did happen to American citizens. It like that are still alive and will be on the show at some point, and it's the same government that we still serve today.
And I think people really overlook how important this time period was to like where politics and stuff have moved. Like, the 90s, I think have been completely overlooked as having not very great music, not much happened really, when really a lot of shit happened in the 90s. And this was like kind of a big point, like a turning point.
We elected a rapist as president, that's important.
You're really trying to get shot.
Dan, are you suicidal?
All or nothing, man. I'm not suicidal, and I've already planned out what I'm going to say at the beginning of that episode, but I should probably include also, I'm not suicidal. Good night.
All right.
I mean, the Davidians also said that they weren't suicidal, and see what happened to them. So it doesn't really matter.
Yeah, I mean, I think this miniseries is definitely worth showing to someone who wants to learn more about it. They took a few creative liberties, a few artistic liberties, in how they portrayed certain things, but they got the bulk of the main facts right. And even people who are, I guess, would be more sympathetic to the side of the Davidians, it's still not completely obvious what happened with the fire. But the more likely things, either was an accident or it was because of the incendiary rounds. It was the least likely thing was it was set up by the Davidians themselves for some sort of mass suicide type thing.
And they pointed out a couple more times in this episode. David actually says on the phone in that final conversation with Gary that when he's saying, I'm going to come out, he blatantly says, I do not intend to die in this place. I am going to come out. It is not my intention for us to die here.
Yeah, and listening to the interview with David Thibodeau on the Scott Horton Show, which you can find on iTunes under Scott Horton Show interviews, if you want to find it easier. David Thibodeau, or no, I think Scott Horton was the one. David Thibodeau on some of these like grayer areas about the fire, he blatantly says like, I don't like to get into it because I can't say for sure. Man, one of the things that really like was a kick in the balls, I thought, was like toward the end of the interview when he's like, honestly, like, I didn't think it was possible for our government to even be possibly responsible or do the things that they did, even at the time or after. Like, I didn't think it was possible for them to be as wrong as they were. But then looking at the documentary and seeing like the infrared stuff and seeing, the FLIR footage and all that, he's like, I I can't even anymore. Like, he said that he stopped giving speeches and stuff because he's like, I don't even know what to think anymore. It's like, it's crazy. And Scott Horton was pointing out, like, he's a genius on all the details and everything, but he's talking about the evidence of the incendiary rounds, and it makes a really hard case for them starting the fire. But honestly, for me, it doesn't matter whether they started the fire or not. They basically all but knew definitively that a fire would start if we did this, because of all the other cases where this exact same thing happened. So maybe they did, maybe they didn't, doesn't matter. They're still responsible for the burning to death of women, children, and men that were peaceful American citizens.
I couldn't have said it better myself, Dan.
All right, well,
We got reviews. Don't
give me some
forget the
reviews. I don't know if I want reviews. It might bring me down at this point.
No, we got to have some reviews. Den of Geek, our favorite. He has some good. He's got some decent thing to say here, but he starts off. It's kind of irritating because he starts off saying, though it's been overstated at this point in each of my previous reviews, Waco is too simple to be great, which I don't see that at all. I didn't see simple to be great. I don't see simplicity in this at all. I think they really took some ballsy moves in this without blatantly saying, hey, the FBI screwed up big time.
If this is simple, then our talk about Waco is like child's play, because we were totally on the side of the Davidians, and this was back and forth the whole way through, and superhuman and not superhuman, super human, very human, and amazing, like super complex.
Which he's not taking the FBI side in this. And this kind of changes my kind of thoughts about this guy, because he says Waco is too simple to be great. What should have been a nuanced retelling of a group of religious fanatics demonized by shoot first, ask questions later federal agents with no side in the wrong.
Oh shit! He said shoot first.
He became a single-minded story about the good guys being crushed by the bad guys. I didn't really necessarily see that. I didn't see it as a what.
So he's saying that it should have been more of that? Like it should have been
more?
No,
he said it should have been more focused on nobody was in the wrong here. It was just basically a big drama. Just a big thing that happened, and there's mistakes on both sides. Which I think they pointed out there was mistakes on both sides.
Hardcore. By the end, you're like, I don't know how I feel about David, because even though he wasn't holding people hostage, he was very much pressuring them clearly in the show to stay
very
there.
Manipulative at that point to stay. Yeah. He says what happened at Waco was a complex, multifaceted tragedy that saw massive injustices committed by both parties. Though only one party eventually ended up paying the price, the retelling too comfortably chose its side and downplayed the disturbing elements that muddied the water.
Give me Den of Geek's contact information. I gotta talk to this guy.
Maybe, yes. But then he goes on to say, this is the part I kind of like. He said, he continues down the paragraph, says, the right-winged radio host was a device that never really had any payoff besides this week's heavy-handed epilogue. He thinks they should have focused more on the communication between the radio host and the Davidians. He says, another detail that comes early on in the episode that's often overglossed is that the lawyers actually entered the compound. If the Branch Davidians had ever made it out, they could have been the real heroes of the story. So he's pretty much saying if they would have made it out, they probably would have, their story would have been a lot different, and their story would have got out a lot different. And we
all agree, and that would have been great, but we can't change history.
Right.
And now they're martyrs that we've all forgotten.
He just thinks it's too Davidian-sided, but I did think he had more valid things to say than just, oh, they're portraying these people as a fantasy and stuff.
Yeah.
He kind of elaborated better, and I liked that.
For sure.
This next one is from flickeringmyth.com. This basically just does an overview of the entire show, and then at the very end, he gives kind of a little tiny opinion of it. It says, if there are lessons to take away from the Waco siege, it is that people need to learn deep thinking. This whole tragedy could have been avoided if the individuals on both sides had thought rationally instead of emotionally. I agree. Very much agree.
Mm-hmm.
And then there was one on Rotten Tomatoes that I haven't read yet. I haven't seen before. This one is kind of very irritating to me. And this kind of goes back to what I said about overlooking this time period and the importance of it. This person, Karen Han says, though it's difficult to say whether or not the 1993 Waco siege warrants revisiting, the Paramount Network new 6-part miniseries does the best job of examining such a loaded question. Mm-hmm. Why is it not worth revisiting? Why would, like you said, this is something that happened in our lifetime. You didn't know shit about. You had never really put two thoughts of it. This is a very important incident in our history, our close history, that definitely needs revisiting, I think. That needs to keep being brought up and brought to light so something like this doesn't happen again. Justin, I like seeing your facial expressions when I'm reading these things.
Always like, dude, those people are just dreadful. I was reading some reviews myself, and I feel like if I were to show this to someone who didn't already have an opinion, they might be more interested in learning about it and be like, wow, this really happened. Oh God, I gotta look into it. But it seemed like some of the reviews, like, we're just shilling for the ATF and things like that, and the FBI.
Well, that last one I read, I'm just like, that's like basically saying, do we really got to bring up the Holocaust again? Is that something we really got to focus on?
Yeah.
Do we really got to?
In our lifetime, they were tanks in America against citizens. Like, is this? Everyone calls Trump a Nazi, and everyone's thinking it's the end of the world, but
it was war crimes committed against our own people.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it's not really, doesn't really warrant revisiting at this point. Haven't we talked about this enough? No, we haven't. Nobody's really talked about it till this point. It's kind of been forgotten about.
So, I don't know if we really need to, because we've gloated and slobbed all over this show enough about how much we love it, but anybody want to give any final thoughts? This is the end of the Waco Rotten Potatoes miniseries recaps, obviously, unless they decided to do more, like Aftermath or something. I'm sure that they won't. I think the first question I'm going to ask Gary when I talk to him is, how the hell did this show get made? But yeah, do you guys have any final thoughts on this? Do you guys have any final recommendations? And I actually, when this comes out on DVD, I'll probably do some sort of promotional giveaway or something, some sort of competition. So keep an eye out for that. But Justin,
yeah, I overall, I mean, I was really, I felt this was just going to be another shilling for the government, not really telling anything. I was wrong.
There was no thought in my mind that wasn't going to be the case.
Yeah. And so I think this was a useful way of telling the story. And I don't want to say enjoyable, because it's not an enjoyable thing, but in a format that I think your average person could follow.
Yeah.
They did a great job. The acting was great. The production was just like, how did this get made with this quality? Like,
right.
There was a lot of time and resources put into this. And then I'm just happy that, David Thibodeau, who is alive and lived through it, got to tell his side, got to, he seemed very happy with it, from what I've heard him say, that he thinks they did a good job.
Absolutely.
With the whole thing. So
I'm stoked that, Gary got to tell his side too, because it didn't paint him in the bad light that we didn't really give them the benefit of the doubt that much in our conversations. So it was eye-opening even for me, seeing the other side. And I love that he got to, they took both sides into account. They took both books into account, which never happens.
Right. Well, I mean, that's all I have to say. Dan, Craig, thank you guys for letting me be a part of this with you. I mean, this was when I learned all about what happened, and I knew nothing, and I started reading, and I was like, all right, at the very least, these kids didn't need to die. At the very least.
Right.
And we can't just sweep that under the rug. So I'm glad we got a chance to talk about it. I'm glad that this miniseries really showed pretty accurately what happened, and I'm glad that more people, hopefully, if they take the time to watch it and then maybe go out and watch some of the documentaries, Rules of Engagement, A New Revelation, and the Fleer Project, or read the books, Davidian Massacre, or just anything like that.
Scott Horton Show, David
That's how it
Thibodeau.
showed. Exactly. You can also just Google Scott Horton Waco, and he used to do
Right.
like a episode every year from when it happened until like a year or two ago. He would do a recap of the relevant stuff he's learned and things like that. So,
Like I
thanks a
was
lot,
telling
guys.
you, I think it needs to keep being revisited. That's like that one, that final review I read that said, "Do we really need to revisit that?" That's like saying, "Do we really need to talk about the Holocaust again? Like, haven't we
Right.
talked about that enough?" It's like this is so close in our recent history. It's just like, yes, we do. We should keep talking about it. And the one thing, my final thoughts were, one review I read had said something along the lines of, this is kind of Paramount is trying to like revive themselves and like kind of have a comeback. And this reviewer was saying, well, I don't really think this was a decent attempt. This should have been like part of like maybe a bigger attempt to revise themselves, that they could have done a better job.
Yeah, they've got my vote all the way.
Personally, yeah, I think ballsy, very ballsy, and I'm so glad that somebody like Paramount would attempt to bring this perspective to mainstream, to like a mainstream avenue of media, the way they did, to bring this kind of a perspective to like mainstream networks. And if this is them reviving themselves and they have more in the works, I can't wait to see what else they have planned in the future.
Absolutely. And in
And
my
just to let anyone
conversation,
know- yeah.
in my conversation with Gary, to have him on the show and talking to the Paramount lady, like in my initial message to Gary, I said, we did a two-part episode on Waco, and we've been following the series. We've been doing recaps every single week on the show and talking about it. And so we wanted to, get you on and talk about the discrepancies in the show, your experiences, and talk about your book and all that stuff. And the Paramount
I actually
lady
bought his book, so
yeah, I'm gonna have to get it too. The Paramount lady though, she not only gave me the green light, but she was like, also thank you so much for keeping the story of Waco alive. We really appreciate it. I'm like, holy
That's awesome.
shit!
Wait, really?
Yeah. Well,
Wow.
awesome.
yeah, I can pull it up here to make sure I got the quote right.
Well, while Dan looks that up, I want to say to anyone listening that hasn't been able to watch it because they can't find it or whatever, it's literally $16 on iTunes for everything, and
Nice.
it's well worth the $16 to watch this if you want to go the legal route.
Yeah, that's a pretty cheap series, because a lot of times series are like $20-$30. So.
I mean, it's a freaking 6-hour movie. And you pay more than that for the new Spider-Man movie. You pay $20 for an hour and a half. This is 6
Right.
hours,
Yeah.
and it is movie quality. It is fantastic. Okay, she said, and I quote, "This is good to go. You can coordinate the scheduling with Gary. Thanks for your continued interest in Waco." So that could mean continued interest in the show, but I took it to mean the actual thing. And since they seem to care about getting the story out there, I applaud them, and I'm going to take it however I want. But Justin, you said thanks for us having you on. Thank you so much for coming on, and thanks for being a part of this and alerting us to this story, because I knew so little about it before we started talking, and it has really enlightened me, and I hope it has for other people too. Not only my digging, but even more so the show. So thank you, Justin. Thank you, Craig.
No problem.
And we will be in discussion on what we will do in the future together, because I really enjoy it. So thanks, guys.
Yep.
Thanks.
All right, talk to you later.
All right. Later, guys.
Sabotagers and troops for what?
Nothing scares the powers that be more than the people that don't need them. This is our time to prove through suffering that we are worthy of the miracle that's to come. Big Brother wants to come in here and fight. We will fight back. Know it or not, you came here to be tested. And this is a test.
This has been a Goulash Media production. goulashmedia.net.
This concludes our broadcast day. Click.